Thank you all for being here. Before we get started, I want to introduce some of the folks that are either currently standing behind us or are about to be standing behind us. So Jonathan Thompson of the National Sheriff's Association is behind me. Lindsay Wallace, Secretary, Arkansas Department of Corrections. Brandy Moore White with the Council of Prison Locals. She's from Arkansas. Scott Bradley, Arkansas Sheriff's Association, and Dexter Payne, Director of the Division of Corrections. I'm happy to be here joined by Senator Cotton, the governor, and Chairman Carr. Really exciting day. We've had a full day of visiting Varner. We came back here for a discussion about this ongoing issue of the damage that having cell phones, contraband cell phones, in prisons, in jails, but particularly in prisons, all the damage that it's causing. You know, we have this concept that we're going to lock someone up so they can't do that again, right? So they can't harm this person or someone else like them again. And that's not exactly what happens when they have the ability to communicate illegally through contraband cell phones in the prisons. So what we saw this morning, could we go to the next slide? Oh, I have control. Imagine that. Yeah, so this is what we saw at Varner. These are just a sample of the confiscated cell phones, and you see the drone on the end that's used to drop cell phones in and around the property. The tank there was a air tank that was ordered online. It was stuffed with phones, shipped into the prison, and when they opened it up, there were lots of phones in it. So look, this is an ongoing problem. We know what the problem is. And thanks to Senator Cotton, who has been pursuing a solution through legislation for years. I've been happy to cheerlead for him, but he's been the driving force. And when he could not get, for whatever reason, other people to think clearly and join him, he did it again. He introduced it again. He introduced it again. He introduced it again. Had he stopped and said, this isn't going to work, we're never going to get it passed, then we most likely, in my estimation, would not be here today. It's his persistence in driving this issue that has led us to this extraordinary moment today, which we'll get into the details of briefly. So I just want to thank Senator Cotton for leading on this. I want to thank the governor for being an advocate for this change. I want to thank Chairman Carr for being here and being so supportive. The FCC plays a critical role on this, particularly if we're not getting the legislation through Congress. So it's a really important day. Turn it over now to Senator Cotton.
Thanks, Tim, and thanks for hosting us. Thank you all for being here. Years ago, with the help of correctional officers like Brandy and their union and correctional professionals like Dexter and Lindsay, it came to my attention that contraband cell phones in our prisons and our jails were a severe threat. In many ways, it's the central kind of contraband because it enables anything else. Weapons, drugs, money. That's a threat to other prisoners in prison. It's a threat to our correctional officers, and it's a severe threat to our communities as well. There are numerous examples of hardened criminals using contraband cell phones in prisons, in jails, to order hits or other crimes on law-abiding Arkansans and across the country on people in all 50 states. So I introduced legislation that would allow our state prisons and jails to use targeted jamming technology to prevent cell phone signals. So our correctional officers don't have to put their own lives at risk. They don't have to go hunting for every cell phone in cells and common areas that have been thrown over the fences that have been delivered via drones. As Tim said, that law hasn't passed yet, but there's usually more than one way to skin a cat. And what I'm focused on for the people of Arkansas is not necessarily passing laws or putting out press releases, but getting results, making a difference in their lives. And I'm pleased that we've reached the point because we have a president, President Trump, who's dedicated to law and order, and a FCC chairman in Brendan Carr, who is going to drive that agenda forward to allow our state prisons and jails to use new, modern, cutting-edge technology to put in jamming in place so contraband cell phones will be nothing more than dead paperweights inside of our prisons and jails to protect other prisoners, to protect correctional officers and guards, and to protect all law-abiding citizens outside of our prisons. So we welcome Chairman Carr to Little Rock. We're excited to hear what he has to say. First, though, we're excited to hear from our governor.
Thank you, Senator Cotton, and certainly thank you to our Attorney General, Tim Griffin, who's hosting us here today. But more than hosting, Tim is leading when it comes to really addressing and raising awareness for public safety. And I'm thankful that we have a great partnership here at the state level and in addition with our federal delegation. We would not be standing here to Tim's point earlier if it was not for the relentless pursuit of Senator Cotton. He's not only introduced legislation, but mostly he's raised awareness. And he's made sure that this is something that is on the forefront and that now we have an administration that is actually taking action. I'm thankful for the cooperation across our county, our city, our federal and state delegations coming together and really leaning into public safety. We know that one of the greatest responsibilities we have as public servants is actually helping create safer, better communities. And this is another way for us to do that. Unfortunately, we've made it easier for criminals and harder for our corrections officers to maintain safe facilities. And that stops today with the action and the partnership with our federal government. And we're very thankful, again, Tim, for you hosting us and for your leadership here at the state. And certainly, Senator Cotton, we wouldn't be here today without you. So thank you for what you're doing. And with that, I'll turn it over to Chairman Carr, who we're very excited to have here in Arkansas.
You heard there was a football game somewhere.
Yeah, not too far, a couple miles from here. Well, thank you so much, and thank you to Senator Cotton for your strong leadership on this issue. The legislation that he has introduced to address contraband cell phone has significantly moved the ball forward in the conversation. As he indicated, we're now at the point where we can deliver results. Thanks as well to the governor, who has put public safety and safer communities first here in Arkansas, and it's been an inspiration to us at the federal level to build on some of the successes that she is having the back of law enforcement and the Attorney General as well. He's led the effort, bringing together more than 30 Attorney Generals to push for the type of relief that we are talking about here today. Most Americans don't think about it, as we heard, that when someone gets behind bars, the worst of the worst, they think it's over. The reality is we have cell phones that are pouring into prisons by the tens of thousands. Georgia, one state alone, pulled over 15,000 contraband cell phones out of their prison in 1 year, and we're seeing that all across the country. These contraband cell phones are being used to run drug operations, to call in hits, to order kidnappings. We had one story where a prosecutor had his father kidnapped by an inmate that he put behind bars. Just a couple years ago, I had the chance to meet Captain Robert Johnson, who was a corrections officer at the Lee Correctional Facility in Bishopville, South Carolina. His job, as it turns out, is one of the most dangerous jobs in the prison system, which is identifying and confiscating contraband cell phones. He was so good at his job that one of the prisoners there used a contraband cell phone to call in a hit on him. 5:30 in the morning one day, he was getting dressed for work. Someone kicked down his front door, shot him 6 times in the chest, and by a miracle, he survived. Others have not been so lucky. And so the time has certainly come where we need to do something about this serious threat to public safety, not just for our corrections officers, but for the general public as well. President Trump has been very clear. He is making America safe again. President Trump's been clear throughout his administration and the federal agencies that having the back of law enforcement is a top priority. For my part, I very much welcome the partnership with law enforcement, with Jonathan from the National Sheriff's Association, who's done great work advocating for the members of his association. So today what we're announcing is that the FCC, at our next monthly meeting in September 30th, we're going to vote on a proposal that will lift a federal restriction that has prohibited state and local prisons from jamming cell phones. Over the years, the FCC has authorized various different technologies to try to identify contraband cell phones and shut them down. They've worked in some cases. They have not worked in other cases. Other countries and the federal government have authority to jam within their facilities, but state and local officials have been denied that ability based on, in my view, a misreading of federal law. And so we're going to propose to adopt new regulations at the federal level, at the FCC, that for the first time ever is going to authorize jamming in state and local prisons. It may not be a silver bullet. It may not be the right fit for every facility, but there are certainly lots and lots of facilities around this country where this type of solution will and can make a significant difference. We're going to make it flexible. It's not going to be mandatory on any facility to do this. And the technology has evolved where you can tailor the jamming solution in ways that will not necessarily interfere with someone that's driving on a nearby highway or a community that's nearby. But again, when you step back and look at the numbers that we've seen, thousands and thousands of cell phones. When we toured Varner this morning, we met with Officer Shore. He said that contraband cell phones are the root of so many evils taking place, not just in prisons, but across the country for the crimes that people are phoning in and they're enabling. Again, President Trump has been clear that we want to have the back of law enforcement, of public safety, and we're going to do that at the FCC. The first vote, again, will be September 30th. That's a proposed rule. We have to run a period of time for a comment cycle, and then our plan is moved to a final order in relatively short order at the FCC that, again, will authorize for the first time jamming solutions to make a dent in this scourge that we see across the country. So with that, thanks again to the Attorney General. Great to be with you today.
Thank you. I would just emphasize that we heard this morning loudly from officials at Varner. This won't solve every problem. This is almost a direct quote. This won't solve every problem in the prison, but it'll solve many, many of the problems. And make no mistake about it, contraband cell phones kill and endanger law enforcement on the inside and your neighbors, your friends, neighbors, community members on the outside. That's what's at stake here. Happy to take any questions.
Arkansas advocate. You said that this might be a question for Mr. Carr, but you said that there has been a misreading of the law where these jamming solutions are concerned. Could you expand on that a little bit?
There's a provision of federal law, to be specific, 47 U.S.C. 333, that prohibits the jamming of authorized communications. And so the theory had been that you can't jam any communications. But what we can do at the federal level is we authorize communications or we don't authorize communications. And so what we're going to do is we're going to deauthorize the lawful use of contraband cell phones within the confines of prisons. So once contraband cell phone use is not an authorized communication, then the federal law is no longer a prohibition to jamming it. And that's well within the FCC's authority to give that reading to federal law. So again, people thought there's nothing we can do. Federal law says you can't jam. But again, only you can't jam authorized communications, and we can simply deauthorize, from a federal authorization perspective, contraband cell phones.
Vote is September 30th. When could this actually be in place?
It usually takes a couple months to get to a vote, and so I would anticipate sometime next year that we might be in a position, obviously as early as possible in my view, to get these solutions in place. A lot of prisons already have some technology solutions in place. For instance, there are systems that are supposed to catch contraband cell phone calls. So instead of going from a contraband cell phone to a legitimate nearby cell phone tower, it's supposed to capture the call within the prison and then route it so it doesn't actually go anywhere. There potentially are ways that you can move some of those contracts, move some of that technology over to a jamming solution. So there may be instances where there could be relatively quick solutions, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to move as quickly as possible because, again, every single day that goes by, we're leaving the American public exposed, and we've got to close that loophole.
Any other questions?
Senator Cotton, you said that there had been hits ordered on law-abiding Arkansans. Could you expand a little bit on that and provide a little more specific details about that?
I'm sure I said law-abiding Arkansans, but law-abiding Americans in other states. We've had lots of crime here. I think Varner said they had collected over 350 cell phones in just the first 7 months of this year. Those are being used to get weapons into prisons, to get drugs into prisons, and can be used, especially among gangs, to threaten people outside of the prisons. Chairman Carr gave the example, was it in Georgia, where one of the correctional officers who was in charge of confiscating cell phones was actually the subject of a hit from someone who had a cell phone inside the prison, because that's the thing about which the prisoners most care, more than weapons, more than drugs, because it enables them to continue to exert criminal control outside of the prison. So what we don't want to have is cell phones continued presence in our prisons here in Arkansas and get to the point where we do have a correctional officer or we do have a law-abiding Arkansan outside of a prison or a jail who's the victim of a heinous murder because that cell phone is present there.
Yeah, and I would add, because your question is about Arkansas specifically, we have numerous examples of extortion in Arkansas. Some go further than others when they're caught, but when I was at your press conference, Senator, earlier in the year in Washington, I recall telling the story of an inmate who was contacting another inmate's mother on the phone and saying, if you don't get us this money, we're going to kill your son. So, I mean, this is not up for debate. It's well established that this is what goes on. We can give you all sorts of specific facts, but no credible person disputes the heinous crimes that are being committed with these cell phones.
It wasn't that long ago. I think it was actually Georgia as well. There was two 13-year-old kids who were shot at a birthday party from a hit that had been called in from a contraband cell phone. So we sort of see story after story. Again, there was a prison official who had a hit called in on him. They shot and killed the person they thought was a prison official, but they got the wrong person. So a completely innocent person, just like law enforcement, completely innocent, but that had no connection at all to the prison, was shot and killed because of a hit called in. And so I think the scope and scale of the crime that's being enabled from contraband cell phones is something that everyday Americans may not be aware of, but it's a very real, serious threat.
Yeah, and it's common sense that they're not calling in graffiti. They're not calling in speeding on Cantrell. They're calling in rape, murder, death, destruction, theft, human trafficking. That's what these people are dealing with, because that's who are filling our prisons. So, any other questions? Yes, sir.
I don't know how jamming, that technology works. Is it feasible cost-wise? Is it something that can be easily implemented in Arkansas?
That's something that we've been talking about. I'm looking to see whether I can assist, but
Yeah, I mean, cost has always been an issue. Again, up to now, there are technology solutions that are being contracted for and paid for that simply aren't as effective. And so those existing funding streams can now be shifted over to pay for jamming systems. Also, the cost of jamming is coming down. But again, this will be another issue that we're going to continue to work through. We do think that there are available federal or state funding streams that can be used to support this because, again, it isn't such an interest of the country to solve this. So we're going to work on all of those issues as well.
If I could just add, I mean, in addition to potential federal grants or state appropriations, there's a simple fact of demand. Once the FCC acts and state prisons and county jails are able to actually use this technology, there's going to be a lot more demand for it here. We were at Varner. We have a handful of prisons in this state, but we have 75 counties. They all have their own jails. A state like Texas has over 200 counties. So the demand for this technology will increase significantly after the FCC acts, which of course will create more competition and should bring price competition down.
money well spent, regardless.
Ella McCarthy with the ADG. This is a question for the chairman. In regards to the jamming technology itself, how does it ensure that it doesn't interfere with official prison communications?
There's a couple of solutions here. One, the item that we're going to vote on in September specifically seeks comment on various ways that we can ensure that it's going to be confined to a certain space. And obviously, no prison would do it except voluntarily. And so that prison can sort of dictate how it's designed in a way that's not going to interfere with their communication. So for instance, one way that you can do it is you can focus the jamming on a single cell block or a housing unit, and then the offices and places where public safety officials need legitimate radio communications would not necessarily be jammed. But again, we sort of are ultimately going to defer to the particular geography and layout of prisons for those officials to figure out how do we achieve our end without compromising our own ability to continue to communicate.
And I'm just going to add a word on that as well. Because I've been working on this issue for 8 years now, and this is a concern I've heard repeatedly. Technology has improved a lot, just like the phones you have or your cars, your connected appliances. The same is true with this technology as well. And then the proof of the pudding is in the eating with the professionals here with us. You've got Jonathan Scott representing sheriffs. You've got Brandy representing correctional officers. You've got Dexter and Lindsay representing correctional managers. And they all want this technology. They want this technology, and they know it's feasible, and it's not going to block their cell phones. It's not going to block emergency communication. So the proof of the pudding is really in the eating, that the professionals who know the most and who are going to be using this technology are the ones who've been asking for it the longest.
Yes, ma'am.
There's like some mention of like flexibility, and is the goal to kind of try and do this at every prison and jail in Arkansas, or just prisons?
Let me say something. So my understanding, he's the chairman, obviously. I'm not on the FCC. But, yeah, I'm going to let you handle that one. But it's my understanding, talking to the chairman and having our discussion, that, to be clear, what the FCC is really doing, they're not dictating how to do this. They are removing activity out of the term authorized, right? And so they're basically getting out of the way because it's no longer something that they're authorizing, right? Contraband cell phone communications will not be authorized. That's genius. It shouldn't be, right? So that's going to be moved out of the way. So what they're doing is they're just saying, this isn't authorized. Y'all deal with this. And these folks back here who know a lot more about the problem, because it's their problem day to day in the prison. It's our problem outside the prison. But they know what to do. And if a jail says, not a problem here, they may say at a county jail level, we don't really need to deal with this. The next jail, maybe the one here, which is much bigger in Pulaski County, they may say, we really need this. So I think the flexibility is built into the solution.
What they're doing is removing federal barriers and actually empowering state and local governments to make the best decision, which is how it's supposed to work. And so that's exactly what we're getting to see through their leadership, is opening up and removing those barriers so that we can not have to have a one-size-fits-all, but each individual entity will be able to make that decision about what's appropriate and what's most needed.
Are there systems that Arkansas is looking into or considering for this technology?
Not yet.
At this point.
One more question. Yes, ma'am.
This might be a question for Secretary Wallace, if that's all right. I know that there's been a lot of, that there was some discussion at last month's meeting about gang-related violence within the prisons. And we were just talking about how the cell phones are involved in gang activity within the prisons. Has there been any correlation between increases in gang activity within the prisons and the number of cell phones being confiscated?
Yes, if the governor, if you want to talk about that, that's great, but I want to read this from Dexter Payne from earlier in the year. Let me just summarize this for you. So this is a memo he wrote me, or wrote, that I benefited from as I prepared to go to your press conference, Senator. And basically, they did a survey over all the prisons to see who's been having these cell phones. They're the worst of the worst. It says, quote, we look back over several years and identified 230 leaders currently incarcerated, mostly administratively segregated at maximum security facilities across the state. These leaders are doing between 20 years to life in prison, have lengthy, violent criminal records, also, along with numerous violations while being incarcerated, ranging from disobeying direct orders to assault and battery. These 230 inmates are from all the known threat groups, including Bloods, Crips, Aryan Circle, White Aryan Resistance, along with our largest group, Gangster Disciples. We determined that these 230 inmates have been caught and found guilty of the multiple possession of a cell phone 308 times for a total of 538 incidents. So, yes, the worst people in prison, the most dangerous, the people who are most likely to hurt you and me and our community are the biggest violators with regard to contraband cell phones and are the biggest problem. That's foundational. If anybody else, you said it, but if anybody, I mean, it is what it is. It's everywhere. Yeah, they're not, yeah, they've got along. So thank y'all so much. I appreciate it, you being here, and we appreciate the chairman being here, the senator, the governor, certainly. Thank y'all so much.